The night outside Atlanta was thick with rain, soft and steady against the windows of the Pierce townhouse. Black Naomi Pierce, 24, sat frozen at the dining table, a single sheet of paper trembling between her fingers as her heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the storm. This agreement shall last for 12 consecutive months. In return, the sum of $12 million will be transferred to the account of the Pierce family within 24 hours. She read it again and again, as if the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something sane. Her father, Black Calvin Pierce, sat opposite her, shoulders bowed beneath a faded church shirt, his knuckles white around the glass of bourbon he hadn't touched. Her mother, Black Loretta Pierce, twisted a handkerchief in her lap, eyes red from crying. Naomi's voice came out low, raw. "So that's it? You really signed it?" Loretta's lips trembled. "Baby girl, we didn't have a choice. The bank was—" "The bank?" Naomi laughed, sharp and hollow. "You sold your daughter to pay off a loan." Calvin flinched. "Don't say it like that." "How else can I say it, Daddy?" She slammed the contract on the table, the neat legal print blurring under her tears. "You sold me to Black Zion Holt." The name filled the room like thunder. Everyone in Georgia knew him. The reclusive billionaire who owned half the coastal hotels from Savannah to Miami. A man whose empire was built on discipline and grief. They said he hadn't smiled since his fiancée, Black Amara King, died. They said his heart had turned to marble. Loretta whispered, "He said you'll be safe. He said no harm will come to you. You'll have your own space, a car, staff, everything." "Everything but freedom," Naomi cut in. "And for what? So you can keep this house?" She gestured around. The peeling paint, the flickering bulb, the bills stacked on the counter. "This isn't worth my soul." Rain hissed against the window as a sleek black sedan pulled up by the curb, headlights spilling across the porch. Through the haze she saw a tall driver, coat collar raised, waiting under an umbrella. Black Ezekiel Zeke Whitaker. "Mr. Holt sent his car," Calvin murmured. "He's expecting you at midnight." Naomi's hands trembled, but she stood. "Of course he is. When a man buys something, he expects prompt delivery." "Naomi, please." Loretta reached for her. "He promised it's only for a year." After that what? You think a man like Zion Holt gives back what he buys?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air. Calvin finally rose, eyes shining with guilt. "I never wanted this for you, but I couldn't let your mother suffer. I failed you." Naomi swallowed hard. The anger melted into quiet ache. For a heartbeat she saw not the man who'd signed her away, but the father who once carried her on his shoulders through 4th of July parades. She placed a shaking hand on his arm. "You didn't fail me, Daddy, you just forgot I can save myself." She turned to her mother, kissed her damp cheek and whispered, "Don't wait up." Then she lifted her coat from the chair, beige wool, too elegant for this sad little room, and walked toward the door. Every step felt like goodbye. The rain greeted her in cold sheets as Zeke hurried forward, holding the umbrella over her head. "Miss Pierce," he said respectfully. "Mr. Holt asked me to make sure you arrive comfortably." Naomi met his kind eyes. "Comfort's not really possible tonight, Mr. Whitaker, but thank you." He opened the door and she slid into the car. The scent of leather and faint cedar surrounded her, alien and perfect. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, she looked back once at the dim porch light and the two figures standing in the doorway, clutching each other like people who'd already lost everything. The city unfurled behind them in streaks of golden water. Naomi leaned her forehead to the window. Reflections blurred her face until she looked like a stranger. A young woman with dark skin glowing against the glass, brown eyes bright with defiance and fear, curls loosening around her temples. 12 months, she whispered. "That's all. I can survive 12 months. Zeke's voice drifted from the front. "It's about a 4-hour drive, ma'am. You can rest if you like." Rest sounded foreign. She watched raindrops chase each other across the glass, forming tiny rivers that disappeared into the dark. "He thinks he can own me for a year," she murmured. Outside, lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the coastal road ahead. The path to Holt Cliff Estate, the mansion built on secrets and salt air. Naomi closed her eyes and exhaled. He can't own what he can't break. Far ahead on the edge of the Atlantic, Black Zion Holt waited, unaware that the woman arriving tonight, the one he believed to purchase, would become the storm that changed everything he thought he knew about power, pain, and love. The rain had stopped by the time Black Naomi Pierce's car rolled through the iron gates of Holt Cliff Estate on Sea Island. The mansion stood like a memory carved from stone, tall columns glistening with mist, manicured hedges trimmed with military precision, every window glowing with the quiet gold of wealth. When the car halted before the wide staircase, Black Zion Holt appeared at the top, dark suit immaculate, face carved in control. He didn't smile, didn't extend a hand. He simply watched her climb the steps with the same cold curiosity a man might show a rare object he wasn't sure he wanted. "Miss Pierce," he said, voice deep, resonant, and steady. "You're punctual." Naomi lifted her chin. "I was bought that way, apparently." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe interest, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You'll find I appreciate honesty more than flattery," he replied, turning toward the doorway. "Come in." The interior smelled faintly of cedar and sea air. High ceilings, oil paintings, marble floors, everything whispered restraint and money. A fire burned low in the great hall, shadows licking the walls. "You'll be staying here for the duration of our agreement," he said, leading her through an archway into the dining room. A single table stretched beneath a chandelier dripping with crystals, set for two with silver and porcelain so delicate, she was afraid to breathe near it. "You arranged all this just to eat?" she asked, eyes sweeping the room. "I arrange everything," he said simply. He took his seat. She remained standing. "I thought you'd prefer to understand the terms directly from me." Naomi folded her arms. "I already read the contract." "Then let me translate it into something human," he said, motioning toward the chair across from him. "Sit, Miss Pierce." She hesitated but sat, spine straight. The servants moved silently, serving roast salmon and white wine, then disappeared like ghosts. "Our arrangement," he began, "requires appearances. You'll accompany me to functions, travel with me when necessary, and maintain the image of companionship." Naomi's lips curled slightly. "So the public sees a lover. Privately, we're strangers?" "Privately," he said evenly. "You're free to keep your distance. I won't touch you without consent." She blinked, caught off guard. "Why bother buying me then?" His gaze met hers, intense, unreadable. "Because I needed someone who wouldn't betray me. Someone with nothing to gain and nothing left to lose." "That's not exactly romantic," she murmured. "It's not meant to be. Romance is a luxury built on trust. I lost that years ago." The faintest tremor passed through his jaw when he said it, but he went on calmly. "You'll receive anything you require, clothes, access, security. You may use any room you like except the West Wing." "What's there?" she asked. "History," he said, voice low, and for a moment she glimpsed the man behind the mask, a shadow of pain buried deep. She wanted to ask more but stopped herself. Instead, she focused on her plate, pushing food she couldn't taste. "And when the year ends?" she asked. "You walk away," he said. "Debt-free, untouched, and richer than you've ever been. I'll ensure your parents' future as well." "You already have," she said quietly. "You bought it." The words landed between them like thunder, and for the first time his control cracked just enough to reveal frustration, at her defiance, at himself, at something neither could name. He leaned back, studying her. "You're not what I expected." "Good," she said, lifting her glass. "Expectations ruin everything." His lips almost curved, but didn't. He poured himself wine, the firelight glinting off his cufflinks. "Tomorrow night we attend the Holloway Foundation Gala in Atlanta. You'll be introduced as my companion. My tailor will deliver appropriate attire in the morning." "Your companion," she repeated, "not your guest?" "Titles matter to people who don't matter to me," he said. When dinner ended, he stood and gestured for Zeke to escort her upstairs. "You'll find your suite prepared. If you need anything, ask Rosa, my housekeeper. Breakfast at 8. Try to rest," she rose, holding his gaze. "You don't have to worry, Mr. Holt. I won't cause a scene. You paid for obedience." He stepped closer, voice quiet but firm. "I paid for presence, Ms. Pierce. Obedience is something I can command from anyone. You're here because you intrigue me." For the first time, her heartbeat stuttered. "And what if I stop intriguing you? Then the year will end sooner." He turned away, dismissing her with the subtle authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Yet as she followed Zeke up the grand staircase, Naomi could still feel his gaze on her back, an invisible heat, curious and uncertain. Her new room overlooked the moonlit sea. The air smelled of salt and roses. She stood at the window watching waves curl against the sand, the sound soothing yet strange. Below, the mansion's lights flickered like distant stars. Somewhere in those shadows, the man who'd purchased her sat alone before a dying fire, wondering why his heart had stirred at all. She whispered to the dark, "You can't buy peace, Zion Holt." Downstairs, he poured another glass of wine and murmured to himself, "And you can't buy silence, Naomi Pierce." The next evening, the mansion glowed under soft golden light as preparation for the gala consumed every hallway. Seamstresses and assistants rushed about carrying silk gowns and tuxedos while the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. Black Naomi Pierce stood before a mirror in her suite, the crimson gown draped over her body like liquid fire. The off-shoulder satin hugged her curves, the slit brushing against her thigh whenever she moved. She had never worn anything this beautiful, or this heavy with meaning. Rosa, the housekeeper, adjusted the diamond clasp at Naomi's neck. "You look breathtaking, miss. Mr. Holt wanted the color to match your strength." Naomi met her own reflection. Her skin glowed like polished bronze beneath the chandelier, her hair swept into a sculpted updo. "He doesn't know me well enough to say that," she murmured. Rosa smiled knowingly. "Maybe he's trying to." Downstairs, Black Zion Holt waited near the staircase, dressed in a midnight black tuxedo tailored to perfection. His expression remained calm, but when Naomi appeared at the landing, his breath caught, so slight she almost missed it. The room stilled. Even the staff hesitated to move. She descended slowly, one hand on the railing, eyes steady on his. "You clean up well," she said softly. His mouth curved in something that might have been amusement. "So do you." Their eyes met for a long, charged second, the air between them tightening like a held note. Zeke cleared his throat discreetly near the doorway. "Sir, the car's ready." Zion offered his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated a heartbeat, then slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. The touch was light, formal, but it sent a tremor through them both. The gala at the Holloway Foundation in downtown Atlanta was already roaring by the time they arrived. Flashbulbs exploded as photographers swarmed the red carpet. "Mr. Holt, over here!" "Who's the lady?" reporters called out. Zion's hand rested lightly at Naomi's back. "Smile," he murmured. "Why?" she asked under her breath. "Because the world loves a good illusion," he said. She did. And for a moment it wasn't an act. Cameras flashed as he led her inside. Past murmured greetings and curious stares. Every elite in Georgia's business circle was there. Mayors, donors, board members, gossip-hungry socialites. People parted instinctively when Zion walked through, his reputation preceding him. But tonight it wasn't just power that turned heads. It was the woman beside him, radiant and calm as if she belonged in this world all along. At their table he leaned closer. "You're doing well." "I'm not here to perform," she said. "You said this is about appearances. Let's not pretend I'm enjoying it." His jaw flexed, but he didn't reply. The host took the stage. Speeches flowed. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Then a hand brushed Naomi's shoulder. Black Maya Sinclair, foundation chairwoman, elegant in gold. "Zion, you finally bring company." "And such stunning company." Zion's expression didn't change. "Maya, this is Ms. Naomi Pierce." "Pierce?" Maya's smile held polite curiosity. "Any relation to the Pierces from Peachtree Avenue?" "Used to be," Naomi said smoothly. "Until life got expensive." Maya chuckled, impressed. "Well, I adore honesty. Enjoy the night, dear." When the orchestra began to play, Zion extended a hand. "Dance with me. I thought this was business." "It is. People are watching." "Then let them." But she placed her hand in his anyway, and he guided her to the dance floor. His hand settled at the small of her back, the other clasping hers. Their bodies moved in sync effortlessly, like two halves learning the same language. His scent, cedar, smoke, and rain wrapped around her. "You're nervous," he said quietly. "You think I've never danced before?" "Not like this." She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "You think too highly of yourself," he smirked faintly. "And you think too little of me." As they turned beneath the chandelier, the world seemed to fade. The noise, the flashing lights, the whispers. Only the rhythm of their steps remained, the faint press of his hand, the pulse in her wrist. Then she saw something shift in his eyes, a shadow deep and aching. "Who is she?" Naomi asked softly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Someone who taught me to love," he said, voice quiet enough that only she could hear, "and taught me how it feels to lose it." For the first time, Naomi's heart softened. "I'm sorry," she said. He shook his head. "Don't be. It's what made me who I am." "And who is that?" A man trying not to remember. The music slowed, applause followed, and they stepped apart. The spell broke, but the air between them stayed charged, humming with something unspoken. As they walked back to their table, Maya whispered to another guest, "Looks like the Ice King found his flame." Zion ignored the whispers, but Naomi caught them, and for a moment she wasn't sure if they were wrong. Later, as they returned to the limousine, Zion held the door for her. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "You almost sounded impressed." "Almost," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "I guess I'm learning to play my part." "You're not playing," he said, closing the door behind her. As the car pulled away, she turned to the window, watching the city lights blur past. His reflection glimmered beside hers, both of them looking forward, both pretending not to notice that something had already begun to change. The house had gone quiet hours ago, the kind of silence that hummed like a secret. Black Naomi Pierce sat in the library by the window, her legs curled beneath her, the ocean glimmering faintly through the glass. It was past midnight, but sleep refused to come. She was supposed to endure this year, take the money and walk away with her freedom. Instead, she found herself drawn to the very man who'd bought her time, a man she didn't understand and maybe didn't want to. A soft knock broke the stillness. "Naomi?" The voice was low, hesitant. "Black Zion Holt." She hesitated, then rose and cracked open the door. He stood there still in his tuxedo from the gala, his tie loosened, his eyes unreadable. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. He lingered by the firelight, shadows painting his face in golden smoke. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly, "for tonight." "I shouldn't have presumed." "You didn't," Naomi said softly. "I wanted it too." The confession hung in the air, fragile and hot. His eyes lifted to hers, surprise flickering before gentleness replaced it. "Then why pull away?" She swallowed. "Because I'm afraid. Afraid that anything between us can't be real while that contract exists. Afraid that what I feel is just survival, and what you feel is just possession." He flinched at the word. "Is that what you think? That I see you as something I own?" She met his gaze. "How can I know what's real when everything between us started as a transaction? How can either of us?" He was silent a long time, the fire snapping softly between them. "What if I tore it up?" he said at last. "What if I released you right now?" Her heart leaped, then sank again. "Then I'd never know if what you feel is real or just guilt." He stepped closer, one hand braced against the door frame, his voice deep and quiet. "Then what do you want, Naomi? Not what the contract demands. Not what I want. What do you want?" The question hit her harder than anything else he'd said. No one had asked her that in months, maybe years. She closed her eyes, searching herself. "I want to know if there could be something real between us. Something that isn't bought or borrowed." His expression softened, then wavered with uncertainty. "And how would we even know?" "I don't," she whispered. "But I know we won't find it in one night and one kiss." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe we need time. Time to see what's real beyond the performance." "Without expectations," she said. "Without pretending." A small smile tugged at his mouth. Easier said than done, considering what almost happened just now. She found herself smiling back, quiet and shy. "Nothing worth having is easy." He exhaled, shoulders easing. "We still have a few days before we leave for Paris," he said. "Maybe we start over. No contracts, no roles. Just you and me." "As ourselves," she said softly. "Naomi and Zion." His smile this time was unguarded, real. "Then it's a date." "A real one." She echoed the word. "A date," tasting it like something unfamiliar and sweet. "Not part of the job?" "Definitely not part of the job." His eyes held hers, steady and warm. For the first time since she'd arrived at Holtcliffe, she didn't feel bought. She felt seen. He turned toward the door, pausing in the threshold. "Good night, Naomi." "Good night, Zion." When the door closed behind him, she stood there for a long time, her heart still racing, her fingers trembling where his presence had lingered in the air. Outside, the waves struck the shore in slow rhythm. And somewhere in the mansion, a man who hadn't believed in love for years finally began to wonder if he'd been wrong. The days after their late-night conversation passed in a quiet rhythm neither of them fully understood. Black Naomi Pierce noticed how Black Zion Holt had softened, not in power but in presence. He still ran Holt Enterprises with the same precision that had built his empire, yet with her, his tone carried patience instead of command. When he found her reading by the window or sketching notes in her journal, he no longer interrupted. Sometimes he just watched her silently, as if learning the shape of something he couldn't name. On the fourth night, while they stood near the balcony watching the rain blur the horizon, he said it casually, almost too quietly, "I have to go to Paris next week. Board meeting for our European division." Naomi turned toward him. "Paris?" She tried not to sound disappointed. "I'll visit my parents while you're gone." He paused, then faced her fully. "Actually, I was hoping you'd come with me." Her pulse stumbled. "To Paris? We've been seen together often enough that it would seem unusual if you didn't accompany me," he said smoothly, his voice businesslike. "Besides, there's a reception I have to attend." "It's part of the job." Naomi hid her smile. "All part of the job," she echoed. But something flickered in his eyes, something that wasn't business. "Yes," he said softly. "The job." That night she found a note on her nightstand beside a French phrase book and a travel guide. Thought these might be useful. It was signed simply, ZH. For reasons she couldn't explain, the gesture touched her more deeply than any gift ever could. 3 days later, they boarded his private jet. Naomi had seen photographs of luxury travel before, but nothing like this. The cabin gleamed with warm light and sleek design, every surface polished, every sound softened. She ran her hand across the buttery leather of her seat as if afraid it might vanish. The attendants moved with quiet precision, serving coffee and croissants on porcelain that looked too fine to touch. Zion glanced at her, amused. "First time on a private jet?" She gave a shy laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who remembers their first time, too." She tilted her head. "And when was that?" He thought for a moment. A lifetime ago, when wonder still meant something. "You've lost that?" she asked gently. "Maybe," he said. "These days it's just transportation." "That's sad," she murmured, surprising herself. "To lose the capacity for wonder. That's the saddest thing that can happen to anyone." He studied her face, the sincerity in her voice. And for a long second, something in him shifted. "You might be right," he said quietly. "I'm beginning to see that." They landed in Paris as evening descended, the city already shimmering with lights that spilled over wet streets and quiet cafes. Their car glided through the avenues toward the Ritz, where their suite overlooked the Place Vendôme. Naomi stepped inside and froze. Marble floors, velvet drapes, a chandelier scattering gold across the room. "This is," she trailed off, unable to find the words. "Acceptable," Zion finished dryly, his mouth twitching at the corner. She turned to him, laughing softly. "It's like stepping into a dream." She pressed her palm against the glass, watching the glow of the square below, the rhythm of Paris alive beneath her fingertips. He stood a few steps behind her, watching, not the view, but her. Her excitement. Her light. In that moment he realized she had brought something into his life he hadn't known he'd lost. Color, warmth, the simple joy of being surprised by beauty. Naomi turned, her reflection mingling with his in the window's glow. "You're staring," she said. "Maybe," he answered. "Maybe for the first time in years I have a reason to." She looked away, flustered but smiling. "Don't start saying romantic things now. You'll ruin your reputation." "And what reputation is that?" "The untouchable one." He stepped closer, voice low. "Maybe I'm tired of being untouchable." The air between them shifted again, charged and trembling. She felt it in her skin, in the way her pulse answered his silence. But before either could move, a soft knock came at the door. Room service with champagne. The moment shattered, replaced by the quiet hum of formality. Zion turned away, loosening his cufflinks. "We have the reception tomorrow," he said. "Get some rest." When he left, Naomi leaned against the glass, staring out at the city that never slept. She had promised herself not to fall for him. But Paris had its own way of breaking promises. The ballroom at the Ritz shimmered beneath crystal light as Paris glittered beyond the tall windows. Music drifted through the air, violins soft against the murmur of conversation and clinking glasses. Black Naomi Pierce entered at Black Zion Holt's side, radiant in a deep green silk gown that moved like water. Her locks were swept into a low bun, diamond pins catching every flicker of light. Heads turned, whispers followed them through the crowd. Zion guided her toward a circle of executives. Among them stood Black Kwame Beaumont, tall French Ghanaian, charm curling at the edge of his smile. "Zion," he greeted smoothly. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Zion replied, voice polite but firm. Kwame's eyes shifted to Naomi. "And who is this vision beside you?" "Black Naomi Pierce," Zion said. "My companion." Kwame took her hand and brushed a kiss across her knuckles, his accent rich and deliberate. "Enchanté. You're even lovelier than Paris itself." Naomi smiled politely. "You flatter easily, Mr. Beaumont. Only when the truth demands it." Zion's hand came to rest at the small of her back, warm and possessive. "We have a full evening," he said, steering her away. "Of course," Kwame said with a knowing grin. "Perhaps I'll borrow your companion for dinner while you're in meetings tomorrow." Zion stopped, his tone cool. "She'll be occupied." Naomi blinked. They hadn't discussed any plans. Kwame raised an eyebrow, enjoying the tension. "Another time, then." He lifted his glass in a mocking toast and melted into the crowd. When they were alone again, Naomi turned to him. "We don't have plans tomorrow." "We do now," he said tightly. "I'll rearrange my schedule." "That's not necessary. I'm perfectly capable of having dinner with a colleague." "Kwame Beaumont has spent years trying to take what's mine." Zion cut in, eyes flashing. "Businesses, partnerships, women." "I'm not yours," she said quietly. "Not really." He stared at her, something raw flickering behind his composure. Then he reached up, fingers brushing a stray curl behind her ear, lingering against her cheek. "Aren't you?" he murmured. The air between them thickened. Her pulse quickened. His eyes dropped to her lips. For a heartbeat the world disappeared, the violins, the chatter, everything but the electricity straining between them. Then an elderly board member approached Zion with urgent business, and the moment shattered. For the rest of the evening, Naomi tried to focus on polite conversation, but her eyes kept finding him across the room, the way he commanded respect without seeking it, the quiet authority that bent people toward him, and every time his gaze met hers, that guarded smile softened into something real, something meant only for her. Later, in the elevator back to their suite, the silence pressed close. He stood near enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke, and feel the heat radiating from his body. The door slid shut, trapping them in that narrow space charged with unspoken truths. "Would you have gone?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Gone where?" "Dinner with Beaumont." His voice was calm, but beneath it was something rough, uncertain. She studied his face, the sharp planes, the faint tension around his mouth. "Would it matter if I had?" The elevator chimed. He held the doors with one arm, waiting for her answer. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe it would have been nice to have dinner with someone actually interested in me, not just what I represent." His jaw tightened. "You think I'm not interested in you?" She met his eyes, her voice a whisper. "I think you're afraid to be." The words hung between them, heavy and trembling. Neither moved, neither spoke until the door slid open again. He stepped aside, letting her pass. But the air between them burned with everything they hadn't said. That night, Naomi lay awake in the dark, replaying the look in his eyes, the anger, the hurt, and something deeper she didn't yet dare name. Across the hall, Zion stood by his window staring out over the Paris lights, wondering when a business arrangement had turned into something he could no longer control. The morning sun spilled through gauzy curtains, painting the suite in gold. Black Naomi Pierce stirred awake to the faint sound of jazz floating up from the Paris streets below. For the first time since arriving at Holtcliffe Estate, she felt a kind of calm. No contracts, no schedules, just the quiet hum of a city waiting outside her window. Black Zion Holt was already dressed when she joined him for breakfast on the terrace. He'd traded his usual dark suit for a crisp white shirt and gray slacks, sleeves rolled casually to his elbows. "I took the day off," he said simply, pouring her coffee. She blinked in surprise. "You take a day off?" "You said you wanted something real," he replied. "Let's start there." They spent the morning walking along the Seine, blending with the weekend crowd. Naomi wore a soft linen dress, her curls loose in the breeze. Vendors called out in French, selling flowers and paintings. She stopped to admire a watercolor of the river, and he bought it without hesitation. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," he answered. "Reminds me of how you see things. Bright, alive, impossible to ignore." By midday, they found a small cafe tucked on a quiet corner. Over pastries and espresso, their conversation drifted easily, from childhood memories to the first time they'd ever failed at something. "I built my company to avoid feeling powerless again," Zion said. "But somewhere along the line, I stopped living for joy and started living for control." Naomi listened, chin resting on her hand. "And now? Now I measure my success differently," he said, eyes on her. "In moments like this." That afternoon, they wandered through the gardens of Luxembourg Palace. Tourists snapped photos, but Naomi ignored them, barefoot in the grass, laughing as she twirled with her shoes in hand. Zion stood a few steps away, watching her with quiet awe. He wasn't thinking about board meetings or acquisitions, only how sunlight looked when it touched her skin. Later, as they reached a bridge overlooking the river, she asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Buying my contract." He hesitated. "I regret the way it began," he admitted. "But not you." The honesty in his voice made her heart twist. "You shouldn't have to buy company to feel seen, Zion." "And yet," he said softly, "you saw me anyway." Evening settled over Paris in rose and gold. They dined at a small bistro beneath strings of lights, their table crowded with laughter, candlelight, and half-finished glasses of wine. For hours, they forgot who they were supposed to be, just a man and a woman sharing a moment that felt too fragile to name. As they walked back through the cobblestone streets, Naomi slipped her hand into his. No pretense, no reason, just instinct. He didn't let go. "Today felt real," she said quietly. "It was," he replied. "More real than anything I've had in a long time." Back in their suite, they stood at the window, Paris glittering below. "So what happens when this ends?" she whispered. He turned to her, voice steady. "Then I'll still remember this day," she met his gaze. "And I'll remember how it felt to be seen." For once, Zion didn't reach for control. He just reached for her hand and held it until the city lights blurred into dawn. The glow of Paris had faded into gray skies and restless meetings. Black Zion Holt's calls with his board had grown longer, his voice sharper, his patience thin. Black Naomi Pierce could sense it each night when he returned to their suite. Still controlled, still composed, but with the kind of tension that made silence louder than words. She wanted to help but didn't know how. This world of mergers, takeovers, and corporate wars was one he'd built from the bones of grief. One evening he came in late, rain still clinging to his coat. "It's done," he said. "Black Quam Beaumont's trying to buy a controlling share of my European division. He's already convinced half the board." Naomi stood slowly. "So he's using me." Zion's jaw flexed.
"He's trying to make me lose focus."
"But I'm done letting my pain dictate my life." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single envelope. The contract. "This ends tonight," Naomi froze. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done the moment I met you." He tore the pages cleanly down the middle, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Paper fell like snow between them. "You're free, Naomi. No more deals. No more conditions. Your parents' debts were cleared months ago. You owe me nothing." She stared at the pieces scattered on the floor. "You can't just tear away what's been binding us and expect me to walk away untouched." "I don't expect that," he said softly. "But I needed to give you back your choice." "And what if I don't leave?" she whispered. His eyes lifted to hers. "Then you'd stay because you want to, not because you have to." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy and breathtaking. She took a step closer. "You mean it? It's over?" "It's over," he said. "You're your own woman again." She looked at him for a long moment, then bent to pick up one torn piece of paper and held it out. "Then let this be the last thing you ever buy, Zion. The freedom you gave me." He took the fragment from her fingers, his touch lingering. "So what happens now?" "Now," she said quietly, "I stay because I choose to." Zion's composure cracked. emotion flickering across his face before he pulled her into a quiet embrace. It wasn't desperate or possessive, it was real, fragile, human. "I've never wanted to own you," he murmured. "I just didn't know how to let you go." "Then don't," she whispered against his chest. Outside, the rain eased and Paris glowed again through the glass. For the first time since their contract began, they stood together not as a deal, not as a performance, but as two people who had finally stepped beyond their fears. The calm after Paris didn't last long. Back in Georgia, the air inside Holtcliffe Estate felt heavy again, like the quiet before a storm. Black Naomi Pierce sensed it the moment they stepped through the doors. Calls came in every hour, meetings filled the days, and though Black Zion Holt kept his voice steady, the tension underneath it grew sharper with each passing moment. By the third morning, the front-page headline confirmed what they'd both feared. Kwame Beaumont seeks board control of Holt Enterprises. Naomi watched Zion's expression harden as he read. "He's coming for everything," he said. "He's convinced the board I've lost perspective." "Because of me," Naomi said quietly. "Because they think I'm your distraction." Zion's eyes lifted to hers, filled with that fierce, unflinching certainty she'd come to recognize. "You're not my distraction, Naomi, you're my clarity." The board meeting was brutal. Cameras, investors, reporters. It felt like blood in the water. Kwame stood tall, every word polished like a blade. "Mr. Holt's recent behavior demonstrates emotional instability," he said coolly. "He's jeopardizing shareholder trust for personal entanglements." The phrase drew murmurs from the room. Zion rose slowly, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his voice calm but cutting. "What I've built stands on integrity and vision, not gossip. If the board prefers a man who values profit over people, then by all means, follow Mr. Beaumont." Kwame smirked. "This isn't about integrity, Zion, it's about control." "No," Zion replied, eyes narrowing. "It's about fear. You've never built anything real, Kwame. You only take what others create." Naomi sat in the back, her heart pounding. The men traded blows and words, but she could feel the deeper war, between love and ego, power and trust. When the vote ended, the room went silent. Zion still held majority control, but just barely. Kwame's expression said this wasn't over. "You'll lose it all over her," he hissed under his breath as they passed in the hallway. Zion's reply was quiet but lethal. "Then at least I'll lose it for something worth keeping." That night, Naomi found Zion alone in the library, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, papers scattered like debris from a battle. "You should have let me go," she said softly. "It would have been easier." "Easier isn't the same as right," he said. His voice was raw, tired. "I've spent my whole life chasing control. Then you walked in and made me realize I don't want control. I want peace." "I want you." Her chest tightened. "Zion!" "I know what they say," he interrupted, stepping closer. "That you're a risk, a mistake, a weakness. But they're wrong. You're the reason I remember what all of this was supposed to mean. You make me want to build something that lasts." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "You can't fight everyone for me." "I'm not fighting for you," he said softly. "I'm fighting with you." He reached for her hands, his fingers trembling against hers. "You once asked what was real between us," he murmured. "This is. Every moment since the day you walked through my door." His voice broke slightly, emotion finally breaking past the control. "You're not my possession, Naomi. You're my partner. My equal, my reason." Her breath caught. "Zion, I love you," he said clearly, no hesitation left. "Not because I bought your time, but because you gave me something I'd forgotten how to feel. Hope." The confession landed like sunlight after a storm. Naomi pressed her forehead against his chest, tears slipping free. "I love you too," she whispered, "even when I tried not to." He pulled her closer, his hand cradling the back of her neck, his voice low against her hair. "Then let them say what they want. Let them think I've lost control. Maybe I have, but I've finally found my heart." They stood together in the quiet, the fire casting gold across their faces. Outside, the estate lights shimmered across the sea, and for the first time neither of them felt bound by paper or reputation. They were bound by choice, by courage, by love. 6 months later, the world around them had changed, but maybe it was Zion and Naomi who had changed most of all. The scandal that once threatened Holt Enterprises had faded into rumor. The company stood stronger than ever, not because of boardroom victories or new hotels, But because its leader had learned to build from the heart instead of the ego, Black Zion Holt still worked the long hours, but now his office looked different. The walls once filled with contracts and trophies were replaced with architectural sketches, projects that merged his vision with hers. Black Naomi Pierce sat across the room at her own desk, glasses perched low on her nose, reviewing blueprints for the literacy foundation they were funding together. It wasn't about profit anymore. It was about purpose. "Did you ever think this is where we'd end up?" she asked, smiling faintly without looking up. Zion leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching her. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be running a company and helping design a community bookshop with my wife." "Fiancé," she corrected playfully. "Fiancé," he said, his voice soft with amusement. "I'd have laughed them out of the room." She set her papers down and met his gaze. "But here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, walking toward her. He crouched beside her chair, taking her hand in his. "Do you ever regret any of it? The contract, the deal, the chaos?" She traced her thumb along his jaw, her smile slow and certain. "If that's what it took to find this? No, I'd do it all again." He exhaled, eyes glimmering. "Then I guess I owe your father a thank you for his bad business negotiation." She laughed, low and warm. "I'll let you tell him that yourself." He kissed her palm. "I might." A knock came at the open door. Zeke, the driver turned operations manager, holding a framed piece of paper. "Boss, this came from the archives." "Thought you'd want it." Zion took it, brow furrowing. It was the torn remains of the contract, the same one he'd ripped apart that night in Paris. Someone had carefully mounted it in a glass frame. Naomi frowned. "Why would they keep that?" Zion smiled. "To remind us where we began." He placed the frame on the wall beside their new project renderings, the caption below it reading, "Where possession ended, love began." Later that evening, as the sun dropped low over Sea Island, they stood hand in hand on the same balcony where she had first arrived a year ago. The breeze carried the scent of magnolia and sea salt. "You built an empire, Zion," she said. "Now you're building something better." "What's that?" "A life that feels real." He turned to her, his voice low and full. "Naomi Pierce, will you build it with me forever?" Her eyes shimmered. "I thought you'd never ask." He slipped an emerald ring onto her finger, the stone catching the last light of the day. She rose on her toes, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Always." Below them, the estate glowed with new life. Children laughing in the garden from the after-school program they'd started, music drifting from the open windows, the sound of the sea steady and eternal. As twilight deepened, Zion pulled her close. "You taught me that love isn't something to own," he murmured. "It's something to build." "Then let's keep building," she said. And when the night finally came, they stood together under the stars. Two souls who had once been bound by paper but were now bound by choice. Proof that even the coldest contracts can end in the warmest kind of freedom.